All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you are having a happy holiday season. I am so excited to get back together. I know several of you have done some of my Sip and Stars classes, and we'll see what I'll do in 2025. It's going to be a definitely interesting year ahead. So we'll see what I come up with. But this was just spur of the moment because I've been wanting to get it recorded, and I thought, well, why not see if a few people want to sit in and listen? And then you guys can let me know if there's anything I've missed. Of course, it's high level. All I can tell you about 2025 is it's not anything we've ever seen. And I keep trying to find like a time in history to compare it to. And so far, I have not successfully come upon one where we had all of the outer planets change signs in the same year and the nodes. It's not, again, anything that we've experienced even historically. And especially when the outer planets change, that means we are going through big societal changes, big shifts, revolutions. And I've pulled in some of that historical data that we'll go through and break down. And I will get to, of course, the personal impacts, but the biggest things when we have outer planets changing, when things change in society, of course, then that impacts us as an individual. A lot of that work is more internal, but of course, as we have big shifts and changes, we want to be a part of them and productively using them. And so I thought it would be helpful to get a bird's eye view of what's coming in 2025. Because like I said, it's so unique and different that I just don't think people want to be caught unawares and wait till March. So, but I can't get into too many details, but let's talk about what we will cover today. So again, we're going to understand what it means when all of these outer planets change signs. Jupiter and Saturn, those are more transpersonal. They give us the path between the daily planets, the personal planets, and those outliers, those external planets. And so, but they're also changing signs. So it's just so unique. So of course, we'll talk about Pluto in Aquarius. Even though it's already changed signs, I still, of course, want to talk about it because it's just so new and it's unique. We'll talk about the shifting of the North Node into Pisces and the South Node into Virgo. We're talking about Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries. So they're going to be in there at the same time. We're going to talk about Jupiter in Cancer, Uranus in Gemini, and a little bit for you from a personal perspective about how changing signs and changing houses can again personally impact you. So we've got a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to keep us to an hour in order for this to be helpful, useful, and still a good use of your time and not overwhelming. But I could go on. As I was putting this together, I thought, man, I could spend a whole day really digging in and talking about all of this stuff. And of course, at the end, I'll talk about my worksheet for 2025. I'm going to email you guys it so that you have access to it. And then, of course, we'll talk about this session where we can really dig into your personal charts as well. All right, so let's get started with Pluto in Aquarius. So I've got a timeline here to give you guys an idea of how long it takes for planets to transit through a sign. And that should give you some indication of the work, right? The difference between the personal planets and those outer planets, right, is the personal planet, it hits you like Mercury retrograde, and you know it's happening because you've physically seen it showing up in your day-to-day life. But these outer planets like Pluto and Aquarius, they are something that we feel, and it's like underneath the surface. We know something's changing, but it's not as obvious. So Pluto will take about 20 years to go through a sign. So we just finished the time that Pluto spent in Capricorn. It was a restructuring, and that started in 2008, and it has just ended. It's played a little bit back and forth over the last 2 years into the first little moments and degrees of the sign of Aquarius, but now it's fully in Aquarius. It's not coming back out of there, and it won't be in our lifetime because we're talking about over 200 years before it can come back. So the last time it went through here was 1778, for example. And Pluto's all about power. It's about transformation, it's rebirth, it's death. It can sometimes be fearful because Pluto, of course, is the ruler of the underworld, right? And that is what we imagine as hell, right? Where we go because we've been bad. But truly, when we think about the underworld, right? It is where there's things that are dark and hidden and fearful that we need to learn how to face. And once we face them, then they lose their power over us. And that's basically the work of Pluto. Pluto is asking you to face your fears and take your power back. But of course, that means we have to actually face our fears. So we have to see what our fears are. And for the collective, right, we see that on the world stage. You can't fix something unless you know it's broken. And you don't know that unless what's hidden is brought to the surface. So an example, as Pluto went through Capricorn, was all of the financial distress, right? We saw the banking system and the mortgage system all had huge flaws that we didn't know about, right? And those flaws had to be exposed, and it caused a crisis. And as a result of that, things were rebuilt, restructured, which is Capricorn. Now we'll be transitioning into Aquarius. And again, there's this deep psychological need to transform in your personal chart, wherever you have this. And you notice the work when you have it interacting with one of your personal planets or an angle. And an angle means the rising sign, which is the beginning of the first house. The fourth house, we call it the IC, which is home in the base, your structure. And the seventh house, your descendant, so that relationships, and then the 10th house, the midheaven. The beginning is the angles. So if you're having one of those contacts, you will notice it more. And Sherry, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about your chart today because everybody take a moment to say happy birthday, Sherry. She's having her solar return today. So we're going to pull up your chart because you happen to have a planet at 0 degrees, and you will notice the work. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end as an example. All right. So historically, let's talk a little bit more about Pluto and its time in Aquarius, which again, 1778 to 1798, which of course was the American Revolution. Now we all, at least I did, maybe I shouldn't say we all, but growing up, and we think it was the birth of the United States. Yay, we had freedom on 1776, which is not true. It was the group that decided to declare their independence, but we still had to fight for several years before we actually had that. And sometimes that gets missed in history, right? We just think, oh, it's the birth of the United States. Well, that was the beginning of a revolution, but it wasn't exactly when we were free. So that's something to think about, right? So as Pluto moved through Aquarius, that was as the United States was establishing their independence, of course, from England. We had the help of allies. The French were involved. There's the French Revolution. There's so many things that were happening in what's called the Age of Enlightenment. So all of this says, right, we had multiple crises that were going on that we needed to face in order to then transform what it was that we wanted to become. And one of the things when you think about Aquarius is it's the airwaves. And now, of course, back in the 1700s, it was the newspapers, right? It was the messengers, and that was evolving. You had materials, you had pamphlets, you had the wanted posters, right? All of that was literally physical paper, but it started to evolve. So instead of just the newspapers having control over the information, the power went to the people, right? Even thinking about the signing of the Declaration of Independence, right? This piece of paper where we used it to establish our power. That's the kind of revolutionary energy we get when we're thinking about Pluto going through Aquarius. It's events that happen that unite us as a people, because Aquarius is we the people energy. We've heard about it forever, right? The age of Aquarius, where we think everything is kumbaya, right? And all is beautiful and wonderful. It is heading there, but it will take some work as we go through the early stages of seeing what we need to see in order to transform it. All right. So remember to mark down any questions you might have, and we'll get back to those. All right, so then let's look at a little bit more of the influences. And again, I share the history not because it has to exactly repeat itself, but because I think it helps you understand a little bit more about what the energetic work of this planet means for us. So we always talk about archetypal influences, which are bigger and broader. And as I mentioned, where Pluto energy is, it's deep, it's invisible, it's hidden, but it does help create transformation. It brings up topics of power and regeneration or rebirth. Of course, we talked about it ruling the underworld, but it also rules the subconscious mind from a psychological perspective. And there is where we end up as individuals doing a lot of the work. So whatever personal planets you have that will become a part of this work this year, think about those planets at the late degrees, 26, 27, 28, 29, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, those just, I like to keep the orb pretty tight with these outer planets. Those ones are going to be where you're going to start to feel this work in this next year. Now, Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus. Well, Uranus is the planet of innovation, electricity, the internet. It is somewhat godly in its reach, right? And it represents sudden change and surprises and shocks, right? So if you think about Pluto going through there, this is about big technological advances. It's about making major progress. And again, big social movements, because it's going to bring people together. People will unite in order to stand up to what isn't right. So lots of advances. When we think about Aquarius, I always think of it as like the nutty professor energy, right? It's unique and it doesn't fit the mold. It's also a lot about breaking free, and that's where that revolutionary energy comes to play. So a couple of things when we talk about revolution in the past, Pluto and Aquarius it was part of the technological revolution. And so as it goes through Aquarius, we'll see that again. We're going to see the advancement of more AI. Hopefully what we start to see is AI being used, not just as a chat bot, right? But as a way to do healing, right? Get answers for what things are causing society pain. We can start using it for things like climate, right? How do we come up with solutions to why are the oceans so warm and how do we cool them down, right? Those are the things that we should see that will cause big changes in the collective. So just some advancements there. We'll see more about space exploration. We may see and find more things hidden in space that become available to us in our view. So that could, we could spot more planets, more asteroids, more things like that. Again, because Pluto is about something that's hidden beneath the surface, and that Aquarius Uranus energy can have lots of things to do with things that are out and in the sky. It also, to me, talks about a time where secrets will be brought to the surface, things that we need to know and understand more clearly as well. And so I talked about this Pluto in Aquarius from 1778 to 1798, and a couple other things that it did, because this was the Industrial Revolution. We saw things like steam engines and mass production. Those types of things started happening. So again, it moved things forward by groups or teams of people that came together to do the work. And of course, it removed the old way of doing things and introduced something new. And we'll talk more about that. Global trade became a bigger deal. All of those types of things that, again, united us and made the world seem smaller versus this big disjointed world. All right. So this energy with Pluto, as I mentioned, it's already started. So you've seen a little bit of it, and Pluto only moves a couple degrees every year. So we're only going to explore the first few degrees of Aquarius, and then it will go retrograde. And as we get to the chart later, I have all of that broken down and all of the dates already looked at for you. So when you look at your own chart, you can see these dates and know when things may or may not be of direct impact to you. All right, so that's Pluto. And I'm doing these kind of in order of when these shifts are first going to happen so that you get an idea of that. Let's move then to the nodes. So the nodes are fated points, and we're going to be looking at the lunar nodes shift from Pisces to Virgo, and that happens on January 11th, and it runs through the 26th of 2026. It's about 18 months, about a year and a half every time that we're exposed to the nodes as they move to a new area of the sky and of our charts. And when they move, our fated work moves, right? So that North Node is where we're headed. It's the lessons that we need in order to grow into that energy. And the South Node is the skills and the lessons that we've already had. It's what we've learned. We're pretty strong and comfortable with the South Node energy because it's work we've already done in the past. But if we stay there, I always use this analogy. It's like I keep lifting a 5-pound weight all the time. I'm really comfortable with it, but my muscle doesn't grow anymore because it's just used to it. So it doesn't do me any good. There's no stressor. The North Node brings the stress so that we do the work and then we gain the skills. Now, sometimes that, of course, means that we are interacting with new people and new situations because it's through them that we gain the skills and the lessons. So what's interesting about the North Node in Pisces, which I'm calling your collective healing, versus the South Node in Virgo, which is personal health, is we've just had and still do Saturn going through Pisces for the last 2 years. And so it's like a handoff of a baton. And Saturn says, okay, I've been in here. I've been working with these people. They've been learning how to create healthy boundaries. And I'm confident that they know how to have more faith and trust, and they're letting go of controlling outcomes. The North Node goes, okay. I'm very creative with my storytelling, by the way. North Node goes, okay, I'm going to test these people and I'm going to see if you're right. And I'm going to do it for the next year and a half. And Saturn and the North Node both bring you opportunities based on showing that you're ready for the opportunity, showing that you are doing the work. And as a result of that, you can see some reward. So again, this handoff that happens will start the work as of January 11th. And so I'd like to think about this as balancing faith with facts, because Virgo's about all the details, all the information. I got to know everything and I have to be in control of it all. And Pisces energy is more free flowing. It's creative, it's artistic, right? It's literally water and going with the flow. That Virgo energy can be very fixed and it's stuck in the earth. And that is not what you want, right? So you've got to have the right balance though, right? Because that earth will dry out without the water. And so that's why we always have that the opposition between the North Node and the South Node is because they need each other. They can't get where they need to get without each other. So that's your goal, is how do I use the right amount of water and the right amount of earth to grow what I want for the next year and a half. And then, of course, this applies directly to whatever houses are now being transited by these nodes. What makes, again, this unique year so intriguing and interesting is in March, and we'll look at this more on the worksheet, as the North Node moves into Pisces, and then we have these other, all the planets are going to pass it and move into Aries. And so it's again, like that handoff of the baton story just keeps resonating for me. And Pisces is the ending of something. It's the 12th house. It is endings. And Aries is the first house. It's beginning new things and starting off on an individual quest or journey. And so we're going to see this really interesting back and forth because we're going to have these planets that move to the new beginning, and then they're going to retrograde and come back and go, but wait, I'm actually not quite finished with something and need to finish it before they move forward again. So we're seeing the 29 degrees of Pisces and the 0 degrees of Aries getting worked on repeatedly. And oh, by the way, then we'll have an eclipse. So March is going to be a month to watch out for. March and April will be very interesting. All right. So another of those important events that ends up happening is the North Node will conjunct with Neptune on February 6th. So that's the first planet that's going to meet up with the North Node to again have that conversation about the work it's been doing with the collective and what the North Node should be working on as a result. So watch for that as one of those important dates out there. Now, historically, the nodes, as I mentioned, they move around about every 19 years. And in that time, back in 2006, we actually saw the first vaccine for cancer, which was Gardasil. We also saw the shingles vaccine. And what became really important was food safety, because we had multiple accounts of E. coli breakouts or outbreaks. And we're currently kind of seeing some of that going on now. As I mentioned, Saturn's in there trying to show us where we're weak and where we need restructuring. And then again, the North Node's going to come through and test our structures. Did we do the work? So a collective work, right, is nodal work and individual. And as I mentioned, these are the two opposites. So in this presentation, I've broken down how Pisces is a water sign. It's ruled by Neptune, which is associated with spirituality and intuition and imagination, empathy and compassion. And so when the North Node goes through there, again, there's this need to let go and have faith and have trust. And then we have to be careful because, of course, there's the light and dark of all energies. And the darker side of that Neptune energy is to hide out, to be delusional, to use things to escape, like drugs and alcohol. So I imagine, again, some tests come up involving those kinds of topics as well. But we also will see maybe some great artists that have tremendous breakthroughs during this time. Things like the healing arts, meditation, hypnosis, all of those types of things get accented with the North Node in Pisces as well. And then the things we're moving away from, right? That South Node in Virgo with Mercury, its ruler. And so that means the Mercury retrogrades in 2025 are going to be emphasized, right? Because every time Mercury goes retrograde, the South Node is being activated, and that's activating karma, and it's activating things that we need to let go of. So you're going to want to pay close attention to the dates where we have that going on as well. And when you think about Virgo, you can be overthinking, right? Because it's Mercury, over controlling, overly focused on the details so much that your OCD is overwhelming you. So those are things that we have to see so that we let them go. All right. And then again, another interesting thing that was going on from 2006 to 2008 when it was transiting here is we had the technological boom. So we had virtual reality, right? Things that involve all the digital age. The internet was growing, social media was growing. So there is this, we call it reality, right? But it's really a false reality when we think about that energy in Pisces and Neptune. And we all know reality TV is never really reality TV. It's so staged, but that's the illusion. And so we will make sure that we have clarity and we understand what's real as part of what's changing. And in that, again, I think it's going to become really important with AI advancement, because so much of it is now being able to replicate a person, even though the person isn't actually real. So we'll have to watch for that. There will be tests. Can I tell the difference between what's real and what's not? Okay, so that's the notes. High level, of course. Then I mentioned it a little bit earlier. We will see Saturn enter into the sign of Aries. That happens on May 25th and it runs until April 13th. So it takes about 2.5 years. So we're still in until May, the last of the work for Saturn in Pisces. So we're ready to move forward with that. And it's just now ended its retrograde and it is starting to move forward as I'm recording this. So when you think about Saturn, again, it talks about taking initiative. Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn, which is working really hard. It's government structures. We saw the fact that Pluto went through there and is restructuring a lot of governments throughout the world. But we're also stepping up into individual leadership roles. We're taking personal responsibility. So that is stronger when Saturn moves into Aries, because Aries is about the warrior, fighting for ourselves, being an individual contributor versus part of a team. So when Saturn's in Aries, you are going to work extremely hard for the next 2.5 years on yourself and on whatever the topic is of the house that you have that Aries energy in. And of course, you can compare that to now. Where's your Pisces energy and how hard have you had to work on that area of your life and your chart? So when we see Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries, that'll happen on July 31st. So these two outer planets coming together combine their energy in Aries, which says to me we have a large amount of work to do as a collective on something to do with our individuality, with our fighting, with our inner warrior. And so there can be an escalation of fighting. This can be an escalation of fighting overseas when we think about Neptune and faraway places. So we will watch for that event to occur. And then what's interesting is when they meet exactly conjunct, they're actually both in retrograde. So it's the past, the inner work that we are doing that we have to start reviewing. And then they won't meet again until February 6th of 2026. So this is, again, nothing with these outer planets is just a quick hit and it's done. It just introduces something to us and then we have to do the work. And that work lasts for about 6 months. That's significant. What was interesting when I was looking at history and things that happened, it was between 1996 and 98, the last time Saturn was in Aries, Bill Clinton was reelected. And then he went through the big Monica Lewinsky and the whole impeachment process. Granted, he stayed, but Aries energy also has to do with Mars being its ruler, which has everything to do about sex, right? And Saturn has you being held accountable. So I thought that was very fascinating and interesting. All right, so what else about Saturn in Aries as a collective? Again, I mentioned it's the themes of leadership, of your independence, of being personally accountable, like Bill Clinton needed to be. And again, it's the first house, Aries. So we're starting new things and we're moving forward with those as a collective and as a society. And with that Saturn energy, we've got to be disciplined. We have to be resilient. We have to be ambitious, but it's not the thing that Saturn does with Aries different than Mars does, because Mars is, of course, the ruler and it's just taking off. It's fire, it's passion, it's just marching forward. It has no time for looking back. Like right now, Mars is in retrograde as I record this. And for the next 3 months, you're going to see how Mars retrograde behaves, which I always say is like a spoiled child. Doesn't like it because it just wants to be impulsive and charge on. So there's something about patience and your impulsivity that get worked on because Saturn is the brakes to Mars's gas. So we've got to learn how to move forward methodically and thoughtfully and not just taking off. One of the things that happened in July of 1997 during this time was when Hong Kong was handed over to China, which they are still fighting about, right? Nobody is appreciating that. It was 156 years where Hong Kong was under British rule. So there are big movements that can occur because, of course, Saturn rules governments. So will other countries stand up? Will we see this battle between Taiwan and China, right? That's continuing to fight for the individuality and not be absorbed into China. So that could be something that escalates even more in the year ahead. All right. Then, speaking of Aries energy, as I mentioned, we'll have Neptune enter Aries. Now, Neptune's a planet that, again, takes a long time. It's somewhere between 12 and 14 years that it takes to transit through the signs. So we are nearing the end of Neptune's time in Pisces. So you've seen it, and Neptune's the ruler of Pisces, so it heightens the work. It's very strong there. It gains energy there, and that makes the work very visible. Now, as of March 30th, this is when we'll first be introduced to what it means to see Neptune, our spirituality, our creativity, and our individuality combine, right? I think that it can be good and helpful for people who are spiritual workers and artists, because now you have Neptune, which has all of this artistic talent, in the sign of Aries, the sign of entrepreneurs, and those are combining. So that can be one of the benefits of it, right? So there can be visionary action. We may see spiritual leaders step up and step through. We may see a redefining of having compassion and yet being assertive, right? You don't, just because you have compassion for somebody doesn't mean you should allow yourself to be walked all over. And so we can see some of that work in your own chart, right? You want to go back and reflect. What did it look like to have Neptune go through my Pisces houses? And did I set the boundaries, right? What did I do with my creative gifts and skills? And what am I going to do for myself going forward that connects me with my gifts? How am I going to use them and apply them? this is all about the individual self when we're focused on Aries. It's also how we decide we're showing ourselves to the world. And so I think you will see more significant people step forward and show their gifts and share them with others. And again, it's July 31st where that Saturn and Neptune energy come together. Now, a historical note, it was April of 1861, exactly when Neptune went into Aries, that the American Civil War began. So there's something to fight for as an individual and as a collective. That is what we're being shown. And well, does that mean we're going to be, fighting and at war for the next 13 years? No, but it means that we can't shy away from the fight either, right? We've got to stand up for what's right and what we believe in. Some other things about Neptune in Aries when it was here in the past, again, visionary courage, idealism, pioneering advancements, reimagined leadership, right? Because it's a combination of leadership and compassion. We should see more compassionate leaders standing up for themselves and for their country, for their countrymen. A lot of what's going on in Ukraine, right? That's what we're seeing with Zelensky, is that kind of leadership. And of course, again, you have to be careful, because then the flip side of that is the utopian style of leaders that are creating visions that are false. This is like a time of false prophets too, because of course, somebody's going to be out there trying to delude you. The point of the Aries energy is not that you're following other people. It's that you're tuning in and listening to yourself. So one of the major historical events, the American Civil War, really was, about the idealism of the people. There was this need to separate, right? Owning people. There's two sides. It still is always mind-blowing to me to think that people should have the right to own other people and have them do their work for them, right? So we had this big fight about this equality and freedom, Neptune, and this power structure of people wanting what they want. And of course, it eventually ended up in the abolition of slavery. And even that took time. So again, another thing in history where we think, oh, the slaves were all set free. No, they weren't. But that was when the decision was made that it really is wrong and we have to abolish it. But then things take time to fully unfold. All right. That's a little about Neptune in Aries. And so as we think about our collective now, there is going to be a battle for something that are opposing ideals, like the Civil War was. And we've heard it over the last several years. There's going to be a civil war. But it's not going to look like it did in the past, but there will be the two sides that have a conflicting opinion, and there will be battles over what that is. But what you see in the end is what is right is what wins. It may take some time, but that is why we have to hold on to faith. And we can't pour our energy or our attention into fear, because when we do that, it's the fear that keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger because more people are feeding into it. That's the worst part about the media and the news, because they're creating fear, so you'll watch them more. Turn it off. Don't tune in and don't feed that energy. One of the other positive aspects, innovation occurs, advancements, of course, in warfare communication. This is when we saw the beginning of the use of the telegraph. So again, trying to keep people connected with information was really important during this time. And so we came up with ways to stay connected, to get secret messages to people. So we'll again see pioneering ways to continue to communicate. All right, let's move on. I'm going to start talking faster because we're already running out of time. So Jupiter moves into Cancer. Now, this is a planet that we recognize more transpersonal, right? Because it's the bridge between the daily planets and those external planets. And it happens every 12 years. So you knew 12 years ago what it felt like to have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. Currently, it's still in Gemini. In fact, it's retrograde until almost the end of February. And then it will finish its time in Gemini, where it is at its fall, its weakest there, because it's the opposing house to the one it rules. But then from June 9th to June 29th of 2026 is when we'll have this experience. So this is emotional growth, things to do with families, and expansion, right? That's what Jupiter is doing. So you will look at what emotional growth have you been needing to experience? What are the themes involving home and family that you need to expand upon? What do you need to learn? Because Jupiter is also about education. Jupiter is a gentle teacher, and it's huge. So the topics are huge. So I thought this was a neat thing that happened in 2013. This was when you had Kate and William have their son. The selfie in Twitter became mainstream. And there were several emotional stories throughout the year. Public outrage over the murder of Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman found not guilty, like all things that created a collective emotional surge of energy. Those are the things that you can expect when it comes to Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. So when we think about the themes of nurturing, moms, motherhood, topics to do with mother, I'm certain we'll have more attacks, right, on the feminine power, on our rights. We'll have more discussions about abortion. We'll have more discussions about the pill. We'll have more discussions about Planned Parenthood already under attack, right? So all of those things have to do with family. We'll have more things to do with humanitarian crisis. This will be a lot to do with the topics that have to do with borders and the people that come across them. So all of those things will lead to an increase in humanitarian efforts. Also, when you think about Jupiter and Cancer, Jupiter's expanding on water. So water will be a big story as far as the weather in 2013 as well. A couple other historical events. Marriage equality was expanded globally. Countries like the UK and New Zealand legalized same-sex marriage. So again, it's just a reflection of the emphasis on Cancer themes of home and family, and of course, inclusion as well. All right, and then we've got Uranus. So Uranus has been, this is a bigger deal just because of, again, another planet that takes a long time. So it will be from July 7th of 2025 till 2033. And it's somewhere in the 5 to 7 year range, usually, that Uranus is in a sign. So we've been experiencing Uranus in Taurus for the past, I think, 7 years. And we've seen the rise of Bitcoin, right? So innovation and money has been a lot of what we've seen while Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus. So where do you need to break free? Where do you need to innovate? That's the conversation that happens as Uranus goes into any sign. And so in Gemini, we're going to be talking about innovation as far as information and communication goes. On August 3rd, Uranus will be in the sextile that's most exact. Now it's been in the sextile for years, but it will be sextile to Saturn and Neptune. Remember, I mentioned them earlier. They'll both be retrograde at 1 degree of Aries, and then trine to Pluto at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So again, there's this connection with these outer planets that are working in harmony to try to create these shifts in society. They're working in harmony, but they're working behind the scenes, beneath the surface. So things are happening that we're not even aware of. But when these connections get stronger, is when we may notice them more significantly as changes that are happening in the world. Now, this was an interesting time when Uranus last entered Gemini. August of 1945 is when the United Nations was formed, right? So this energy of collaboration and exchange and global dialogue is what we saw the last time Uranus was in Gemini. And so we should see more of that. It's revolution, it's breaking free. And this again happens in the areas that I talked about earlier with Pluto in Aquarius, because of course Uranus rules that. So the things of change in communication, in technology, how we exchange ideas, the rapid growth of AI, and how does society change as a result of that? What frameworks do we have to change as a result of that? And unfortunately, the last transit from 1941 to 49 in this area of Gemini was with World War II. But we saw innovations because of that with radar, advances in aviation. We'll probably see more things about rockets, right? With the satellites, those types of things that will become important. The thing about Gemini is it's about working with the hands. And so when we have Uranus go into Gemini, there are things that we do with our hands that we can do to innovate, which of course we use our hands on the keyboard. We also use our hands to work. It's hands-on work where we can be more innovative and creative as well. All right. Last things I just want to touch on briefly. I think I've covered all of those planets high level that are changing signs. And we'll look at this in the worksheet. So of course, we still have our new moons and our full moons. Those still exist. It's reminders that you still want to set your new moon intentions within like 8 hours of the new moon. And we'll look at the worksheet just to break that down a little bit. And of course, always use the element of the moon. Is it air? Is it fire? Is it water or earth in your ceremonies? That makes them more impactful and powerful. So our eclipses this year will switch because we're leaving Aries, Libra and transitioning to Pisces, Virgo with the nodes. And that's what creates the eclipse energy. So we'll get started with the lunar eclipse in Virgo. That kicks us off on March 15th. So there's an emotional closure and a need for an end of control. There could be something involving health, right? Something that comes to fulfillment during that time. Eclipses always remove blocks and remove things from us in a faded way. Then the solar eclipse in Virgo also wraps us up in September timeframe. And the solar eclipses are usually something that we notice much more specifically. All right. Okay, guys, this is going to be, I'm going to show you the worksheet and then I'm going to open us up for Q&A. So let me reshare this. Okay, so you can see the template. Someone give me, oops, a high five if you can see that. All right. So what I've done in this template is I have created a table for not, of course, every single event for the year ahead, but for the majority of them that will resonate with you. So I have outlined all of the planet changes that we were just discussing, and I tell you when it begins and when it ends and the degrees, which are important because of your chart and whatever degrees are being impacted for you. Of course, I've got the North Node, the South Node, and what I've also included here is when these planets will go retrograde. So you've got all of the personal planets. This year, we've got Mars ending a retrograde in February. Then we have Venus and Mercury that will be retrograde at the same time. Again, this March, April timeframe is going to be significant for all of us. And of course, in Pluto, Saturn, Mercury, as I mentioned, each of these Mercury retrogrades, you want to pay close attention to because they're going to activate the South Node. And then because of all the sign changes and the backs and forths, I've broken that down So you're seeing Saturn change places 4 times, Jupiter twice, Uranus 4 times, Neptune 3 times, Pluto will stay in Aquarius, and Chiron stays in Aries. And then what I've broken out for you. So what I do, if we have a session, I fill this out for you. I look at your chart. I tell you, here's the house that this happens in. And we have the discussion about what that work means for you in the year ahead. Same thing with the retrogrades and just the placement of the planets. But if you want just to do the work on your own, I'm going to just send you this blank worksheet today because you attended the session, and just make it easy instead of having to go out there and track it down. It also includes a little mini astrology worksheet. And so I've given you the themes of the planets for simplicity's sake, even though they're not exact. The houses and the signs, I've given you the themes of those. And then here's those moons, the new moons, the full moons, and especially the eclipses, the degrees that they happen. The closer that these degrees are to either an angle of yours or a personal planet, the more significant the energy and impact is for you. So I've got all of those broken down for the whole year. And then this reference table. What does Aries energy mean? What are the planets? What do they mean? What are their symbols? So I recognize them. And more breakdown of the house themes. Of course, we have 12 houses. If you've worked with me, I tell you, you own 12 houses on a cul-de-sac, and each house has a unique experience for you when you visit it. So that's broken down for you as well. And combination of all of these different angles and how this contact can affect you if a planet is conjunct or square or trine or sextile or opposition. All of that is included in this worksheet for you. And so if you like to do your self astrology work, all you have to do is plug and play, and you have this available. And like I said, because you came today, I'm just going to email it to you so you don't have to go out there and track it down. All right. So let's bring over Sherry's chart, and I'm just going to show you an example. So let me add this. All right. So this is Sherry's birth chart. And as I mentioned, it's Sherry's birthday. Happy birthday again. And it also means this is her solar return. So this is an important time because the solar return chart, which I don't have pulled up here, but that tells us what our experience will be like in the year ahead. So it's always important to know what your solar return chart looks like. But why I said I pulled this up was because Sherry has a planet at 0 degrees. Now, it's not in Pisces or Aries, but it's still significant because of what I just mentioned, which was when you have a connection, then that connection is important. So this 0 degrees, and I'm going to show you the second chart, and I'm going to move it ahead to February. Okay, let's move it to March. All right, so when your planet at 0 degrees starts getting activated, actually, I'm going to go back to January and show you this a little easier. Okay, so when we have things that are in the same element, so Aries is fire, it's red. Mercury is in fire at birth for her, it's also red. That means these are both fire signs. So whenever you have this 0 degrees getting hit by this 0 degrees of Aries energy, it's the 7th house and your relationships that are being accentuated. And that's going to happen all year for you, Sherry, is every time this space here is activated by Neptune moving into Aries, by the North Node in Aries, by Saturn in Aries, by Venus and Mercury. All of those are people and events and interactions that are brand new and that could introduce brand new people from a relationship perspective. They can be teachers because of that Sagittarius energy. They can be foreign people in foreign places. So that tells me your 7th house of relationships and communication, specifically teaching, is going to be an important emphasis, especially in the first 4 months of the year. And so any of you who have planets either at, as I mentioned, these late degrees or the early degrees, and more exact, the more important it is, you have big work to do in the year ahead. Now, I think that the people that come through, right, this Venus energy, that Mercury energy that comes through, the fact that they will be working together exactly right in this retrograde. So it's not something that we're just completely doing alone, right? People are coming in and coming through to help us do this work as well. But there will be people that will be triggers for us. And I think part of making that work easier is just now you can stop and recognize it. Instead of being triggered, you're going to go, oh, that's why they're here. They're helping me understand Venus. What do I love, right, about myself? What do I have to take my power back from other people and stop saying, I'm only beautiful if people give me the feedback that says that I am? No, I can choose that for myself. Mercury in Aries, I need to speak up myself. I need to speak my truth. And I need to stand up for what I think and speak out about it. So, helpful? The North Node has been in Aries for the last 18 months for a reason. It has been, like I said, it had the baton. This time it's the North Node that's handing the baton off to those planets that are now coming through Aries to see the path that was cleared for you. So now these are all the little people and situations that'll show up to test us. And this is a test. This is a year where we are tested, and it's a 9-year. So that means this is a year where we have to end things and conclude them. And then it's 2026 where we start brand new. Merry Christmas, everybody. I really appreciate you taking time out. Let me check this chat real quick in case I missed it. Nope, got it. Thanks, Finley. All right, guys, take care. I appreciate you, and happy Merry Christmas, and hopefully I'll see you in the new year. Take care, everybody. Be sure and check out your weekly tarot card messages as well. Those, along with this astro lesson, are going to give you the big picture. Thanks again for tuning in. Talk to you next week.